And here we are at chapter 31, Numbers from JE2US-A Novel. Maddie pulled a brown loaf of cracked wheat from the oven. The first slice went into the toaster. She then dished out 2 scrambled eggs onto a plate, peppered, no salt, and a perfectly vine-ripened tomato, several organic strawberries cut into thin slices, and a dozen blueberries. There was fresh squeezed orange juice with a squirt of lime, coffee with 1 ounce of 2% milk, a blood pressure pill, and a few vitamins on a saucer. The Sunday paper was placed to the right of the plate, and the TV was turned to KLMN News. She heard slippered feet shuffling toward the kitchen. Governor Thorogood, still in his pajamas, turned the corner, and his bleary, sleep-ridden eyes doubled in diameter. "Maddie." The way he said it, it sounded like a gasp. "Good morning, Governor." Then, "Your breakfast is ready." She smiled broadly at him. "Maddie, please have a seat." She pulled the chair out for him. He looked at it, then shook his head. "No, this isn't right. You can't do this. I can't do this." He motioned for her to take a seat. Then he pulled up a chair facing her, but not too close. He took a breath, trying to figure out where to start. "I have treated you badly, Maddie. I believed that I was truly privileged. I believed that I had the right to purchase you, to expect complete obedience and service, even against your will." He took a shaky breath. "I was mean to you. I'm sorry. I was rough with you. I know I gave you bruises. I'm sorry." His eyes were now welled with tears. "I touched you inappropriately." He hung his head. "I am so sorry." He tentatively reached for her hand, then pulled back, realizing she had seen this move before. Even though his intentions were different now, he turned his head to the side, unable to even look at her, ashamed of who he was. It was silent for a moment. Then he felt her hand slide into his. She gave it a slight squeeze until he turned to look at her. Still unable to look up, it was her hand that he noticed first. There was no number. It was gone. Then she took her other hand, placed it gently under his chin, and tilted his head upward until he was looking at her. It was the compassion in her eyes that spoke the loudest, that did him in. How? Why would she have compassion for me? The second thing he saw was love. A different kind of love. Again, why? I have given her no reason in the world to show me so much as a dull reflection of love. Tears found the shallow canyons of wrinkles on his face and trickled toward his chin. "I forgive you." She said it with such tenderness, simple, sincere honesty. They would have hugged, but it was too soon. That would come, given time. "You know, your eggs are getting cold," she said, letting go of his hand. They both welcomed the change of subject. "The only way I'm eating is if you sit down and join me." The governor pulled another plate from the cupboard, grabbed some silverware, and scraped half of his food onto her plate. She sat across from him, and they talked. They talked about Jesus, and she told him the full story of what had happened at the warehouse on Friday night. He was soaking it in. Maddie could tell that the governor's hunger for Jesus far surpassed his penchant for scrambled eggs and her cracked wheat. At one point while they were eating, the governor's eyes caught the back of his own right hand, and his fork slipped through his fingers, clanging onto the plate. His eyes broadened in shock. "What?" asked Maddie. "My hand, look. I've got a slave number on my hand." "How? When?" He was shaking now. Maddie, as gently as she could, said, You've had that for a while. You just didn't see it. What? What? What do you mean? I saw that number on your hand a couple of months ago. Everybody has one. Everybody. How can that be? And why could you see it if I couldn't, he asked. It's a proximity thing. The closer you get to Jesus, the more clearly you see yourself, your number. The governor was still looking at his hand, rubbing gently. But the good news, Governor, the good news is that until you see it, you can't give it up. And you can... Just then, something caught Maddie's eye, something floating past the window. There, she saw it again. She stood and walked to the glass wall that overlooked the city. Governor Thorogood followed her. It looked like the sky was clouding up, filling with black ash. But it wasn't ash. It was big flakes or particles or numbers. It was numbers. The sky was filling with cellophane-thin sequences of black numbers. One of them briefly stuck to the outside of the governor's glass wall. 36,483,968. Another one clung to the wall. 423. The sky was choking on billions of digits. Maddie grabbed the governor by the hand and dragged him toward the elevator. I think I know what's happening. We need to go, now. The door opened and Maddie hammered the one with the heel of her hand. When they walked out the door of Paradise Tower, it was already a full-fledged blizzard. The numbers swooping around buildings carried on a whirlwind that was accelerating by the minute. Come on, she yelled through the din. The storm was expanding, the numbers careening off buildings, forming funnels through the city streets. The density of digits was bringing on an eerie midday darkness. Maddie pulled him along. We have to get there. Run. The numbers now seemed to be working together. They were all traveling in the same direction, toward the same destination. Caught in the stream, the numbers now almost lifted and carried Maddie and the governor along. It was now completely black. They were running blind. Then through the swirling darkness, Maddie saw a flicker of light. She saw where she was headed. The front window of Léo des Arts. The spotlight on the painting was the only light to be seen. As they approached, millions of the cellophane integers per second were being vacuumed through the boardwalk window into the gallery and consumed by the torn portrait of Jesus. The number scrawled across the face of Jesus was changing so rapidly that it was simply a blur of black. Maddie and the governor each wrapped an arm around a light pole to keep from getting washed away in the tide. The governor, somewhere between horror and awe, watched as the painting devoured the numbers. The roar of the storm was gaining momentum, thundering down every street and alley. It echoed like the collective cry of a million souls from all eternity past, present, and future. Maddie, with her one free hand, reached and grabbed the face of the governor, shouting, "Your hand! Stretch out your hand!" He looked confused. She pointed to Jesus, then yelled, "Let it go! Let it go!" The governor held out his hand and felt the tug. Stronger and stronger it pulled. He was starting to lose his grip on the meter. Maddie grabbed his other arm. The right sleeve of his pajamas tore and flew through the glass pane. "Give it up," she screamed. He opened the fingers of his right hand and reached for the painting. The governor's number came loose, taking some skin with it. As it left his hand, the front window of the gallery shattered. His lifetime of failings hit the painting along with the last of the billion airborne numbers and the paintings of Jesus. And the painting of Jesus was sucked out of the frame, ascending, blowing the roof off of Léo des Arts. Now on their knees, they looked up and saw Jesus disappearing into the clouds. And then it was still, silent, a heavenly silence. The sun shone down from a cloudless sky. Maddie and the governor struggled to their feet. The gallery was gone, the painting was gone, but the empty frame stood, unmoved on its easel. Later that afternoon, Peter, the brothers, and I were walking by the river, watching the current, reliving the moments of the last few days. We had all seen the number storm in the morning. When it had finished, the whole city had come out of their homes, their cubicles, their apartments, the streets filled with hundreds of thousands of confused, bewildered people, whispering to each other of what they had seen, speculating on what it all meant. As I walked through the throng toward the river, I couldn't help noticing the numbers. Some still clung stubbornly to the hands of the unfortunate. Evidently, not all numbers had found freedom. There was no obvious systematic delineation between those wearing the numbers and those without. In the past, the well-dressed, wealthy, influential, and powerful were never seen wearing the mark of a slave. But now, strangely enough, there were rich and poor, purchased and free, powerful and powerless, indiscriminately wearing the brand. Interestingly, the rich and famous seemed completely unaware of the numbers on their own hands, oblivious, blind to its existence. And the literal slaves still wearing their numbers? I'm not sure they recognized the root system penetrating far beneath their skin. We sat on the banks of the Mississippi, 4 followers of a now missing Jesus. The river was running south at a good clip. I'm not sure I'd say we were all swimming upstream just yet, but there was a healthy dissatisfaction for passively going with the flow. It seemed to us that the number storm had been an intentional act of rebellion by our Jesus, a seismic changing of course. Or maybe this was the doing of his mysterious Father. One thing was clear to us: even though this Jesus, whom we had come to know, was nowhere to be found, he was still up to his old tricks, messing with our typical everyday lives in ways that were recreating us, renovating the paintings of our lives. We were, once again, becoming his masterpieces. That's my story. I told you it was going to be hard to believe, but I saw it. I lived it. This Jesus was no ordinary Iron Ranger. He was no ordinary American. Hell, he was no ordinary human. Our thoughts were interrupted. "Peter!" A voice carried across the water. We strained to see who was calling. There was someone standing on the Stone Arch Bridge a 1/4 mile upstream. Then louder, "Peter!" He was flying a kite. We knew that voice. Could it be? John, James, Philip. We knew that man. Was it possible? We took off running. "Come fly with me," he said. And so we did.